Good morning, my name is Anthony McGrath. Thank you for joining us. In this issue, we examine the best and worst issues surrounding a cultural icon, famously symbolizing the best and worst of America, famously called a little piece of perfection in a bun by the late Anthony Bourdain. We will examine some of the factors affecting our health, employment, and the state of the world, simply built by the burger. Who would think that something so simple would have such an effect on the planet? Everybody has their favorite burger joint. However, let's look at who drives the market. These are the top fast food burger chains, ranked by sales. Not all revenue comes from burgers. However, these guys drive the overall market. McDonald's, $45 billion. Wendy's, $11 billion. Burger King, $10 billion. Sonic Drive-In, $5 billion. McDonald's opened in 1955. Since that time, they are proud to advertise that 247 billion beef burgers have been sold. That is 32 burgers per person for everybody on the planet. On the web are many sites analyzing this, and there we find that they can get 2,024 burgers from a cow. 247 billion divided by 2024 equals 122 million cows slaughtered so far. In the last 5 years, McDonald's boasts of serving over 5 billion burgers per year. That makes 25 million cows per year, or 67,680 cows per day. It takes 18 times more fossil fuel per calorie to produce beef compared to wheat. It takes 15 times the land to produce beef. It takes a whopping 200 times the water to produce a pound of beef compared to wheat. These animals are bred by meat producers and fattened up by giving them about 16 pounds of grain for every pound of beef produced. According to Statista, there were approximately 1 billion cattle worldwide in 2022, up from approximately 996 million in 2021. The number of cows per person is nearly 1 in 5. Some countries, like New Zealand, have more cows than people. It seems that there are cows everywhere you look. So what would happen if we all stopped eating meat tomorrow? We humans tend to argue points in black and white, seeking absolute. In reality, nature seeks a balance, swinging from excess to excess and gradually coming to a center balance point of mutuality. So let's swing away for the moment. No more cows anywhere. What might be some benefits of a global vegetarian diet for human health and welfare? A plant-based diet is generally much healthier than one that regularly includes meat. Healthcare costs would shrink. Fewer people suffering from food-related chronic illnesses would mean a reduction in medical bills, saving about 2 to 3% of global gross domestic product. A vegetarian diet would reduce premature deaths. We would see a global mortality reduction of 6 to 10% thanks to a lessening of coronary heart disease, diabetes, stroke, and some cancers. In developed countries, Vegetarianism would bring many environmental and health benefits. But in developing countries, there would be negative effects in terms of poverty. What might be some costs of a global vegetarian diet for human health and welfare? Millions of people will be out of work. Significant unemployment and social upheaval would be inevitable, especially in rural communities. Cultural identities would be dramatically changed. Nomadic groups such as the Mongols and Berbers, who, stripped of their livestock, would have to settle permanently in cities or towns, likely losing their cultural identity in the process. The world's poor would lose their most calorie-rich food. What might be some costs of a global vegetarian diet for biodiversity? Converted livestock farmland may result in increased urban and suburban sprawl. Centuries of livestock farming have so shaped the landscape that some livestock may be needed to maintain biodiversity. I'm sitting here in Scotland, where the Highlands environment is very man-made and based largely on grazing by sheep, says one researcher. If we took all the sheep away, the environment would look different, and there would be a potential negative impact on biodiversity. What might be some environmental benefits of a global vegetarian diet? Greenhouse gas emissions would drop by a third. Agriculture contributes more to climate change than industrial emissions. Ideally, a plurality of former ranchland would be converted to grasslands and forests, which would capture carbon and further mitigate climate change. Our water footprint would shrink. Fresh water, currently used for ranching, might be directed toward consumption and hygiene. What might be some environmental costs to a global vegetarian diet? Many agricultural regions are not natural farmlands and have nutrient-poor soil. When parts of the Sahel were converted from ranchland to cropland, the result was desertification. Converting former ranchland to forest or grassland would require significant amounts of time, money, and effort. So we have considered some of the extreme positions. What is most likely to happen? It's not this either or vegetarian or carnivore scenario. How can we modify our diets to best balance the costs and benefits of a vegetarian diet? We could eat less, smaller portion sizes, reduce our foodie footprint. We could eat less meat. We could make meat more expensive. We could reduce the prices of fruits and vegetables. We could reduce food waste. Fewer than 50% of the calories currently produced are used effectively. The world's hungry would no longer be hungry. It would take 40 million tons of food to eliminate the most extreme cases of world hunger. Yet nearly 20 times that amount of grain is fed to farmed animals every year to produce meat. In a world where an estimated 850 million people do not have enough to eat, it is criminally wasteful to feed perfectly edible food to animals on farms to produce a burger rather than feeding it directly to people, especially when you consider that it takes roughly 6 pounds of grain to produce 1 pound of pork. As long as a single child goes hungry, this kind of waste is unconscionable. Yes, your beef or pork may be locally grown, but what about the animals' feed? Vegetarians and vegans aren't gobbling up all the grains and soybeans cattle are. A staggering 97% of the world's soya crop is fed to livestock. There would be more land available for our growing population. Countries around the globe are bulldozing huge swathes of land to make room for more factory farms to house all the additional chickens, cows, and other animals, as well as for the huge quantities of crops needed to feed them. But when you eat plant foods directly, instead of indirectly eating bushels and bushels of grain and soya that have been funneled through animals first, you need a lot less land. VegFarm, a charity that funds sustainable plant food projects, estimates that a 10-acre farm can support 60 people by growing soybeans, 24 people by growing wheat, or 10 people by growing maize, but only 2 by raising cattle. What's more, Dutch scientists predict that 2.7 billion hectares of land currently used for cattle grazing would be freed up by global vegetarianism, along with 100 million hectares of land currently used to grow crops for livestock. Billions of animals would avoid a lifetime of suffering. On many industrial farms, animals are kept in cramped conditions and will never raise families, forage for food, or do anything else that is natural and important to them. Most won't even get to feel the warmth of the sun on their backs or breathe fresh air until the day they are loaded onto lorries headed for the abattoir. There is no better way to help animals and prevent their suffering than by choosing not to eat them. Animal numbers would dwindle to manageable proportions with a greater diversity of breeds. The risk of dangerous antibiotic resistance would reduce. Factory-farmed animals are disease-ridden as a result of being crammed by the thousands into filthy sheds, which are a breeding ground for new strains of dangerous bacteria and viruses. Pigs, chickens, and other animals on factory farms are fed a steady diet of drugs to keep them alive in these unsanitary, stressful conditions, increasing the chance that drug-resistant superbugs will develop. A senior officer with the UN's Food and Agriculture Organization called the intensive industrial farming of livestock an opportunity for emerging disease, while the US Centers for Disease Control and Prevention declared that much of antibiotic use in animals is unnecessary and inappropriate and makes everyone less safe. The health services would be under less strain. In the UK, obesity is killing British people. The NHS has warned that, if left unchecked, the country's obesity rates will bankrupt the health service. Meat, dairy foods, and eggs, all of which contain cholesterol and saturated fat, are the main culprits in obesity, which contributes to the UK's top killers: heart attacks, strokes, diabetes, and various types of cancer. Yes, there are overweight vegetarians and vegans, just as there are skinny meat eaters. But, on average, vegans are about 1/10 as likely to be obese as their meat-eating counterpart. Once you replace high-fat animal-derived foods with healthy fruits, veggies, and grains, it becomes a lot harder to pile on the pound. What's more, many health problems can be alleviated and even reversed by switching to a plant-based diet. If these conditions significantly decline, then these health resources could be reallocated. Some obstacles remain. It is not simply about changing our food, but reorganizing the way we live. Economically, and with our focus, currently, we feed people crap food, which causes them to become ill. Then we treat the symptoms. All of this is not only wasteful, but futile. Let's look at the players. Big Pharma. Big Pharma usually refers to the very largest employers, those with tens of thousands of workers and billions of dollars in revenue. They focus on creating markets and conditions that can then be treated by drugs that they make. The companies must continue to encourage doctors to diagnose and then prescribe more and more and more, if revenues and profits are to continue. These are areas of focus, and these: cardiovascular disease, central nervous system conditions, diabetes, Alzheimer's disease, multiple sclerosis, women's health issues, infectious diseases. The industry directly employs 5.5 million people, and many more indirectly to package, market, advertise, and push their product. The biopharmaceutical sector's economic output, which represents the value of the goods and services produced by the sector, totaled more than $1.4 trillion in the US in 2020. If these health conditions significantly declined, then these resources could reallocate it. Less people would be needed in this sector, and this could be painful in the short term, as these are very well-paying jobs. Sarepta CEO Douglas Ingram rang in at the highest total salary of all pharma executives in 2022 by far, at $124,938,694. The average pharmaceutical salary in the USA is $51,268 per year, or $24.65 per hour. Entry-level positions start at $35,950 per year, while most experienced workers make up to $116,468 per year. The average American physician earns $350,000 a year. Top doctors pull in 10 times that. This section I call what is hidden is not seen, and people like their drugs. In the USA in 2021, people with large employer private insurance coverage who had an obesity or overweight diagnosis had an average of $12,588 in total annual health costs, which is more than double the $4,699 in health spending for those with no obesity or overweight diagnosis on their health insurance claims for that year. But now we have the weight loss drugs semaglutide and tirzepatide. These represent a total tsunami of revenue for the companies that produce them. In its third quarter financial report posted Thursday, Novo Nordisk revealed that its best-selling weight loss drug Wegovy, semaglutide, made nearly $3.1 billion in revenue in the first 9 months of 2023. This represents growth of more than 490% at constant exchange rates versus the same period last year. All prescriptions for a 1-month supply of semaglutide since 2018 for any diagnosis or dose, and found that for enrollees with semaglutide prescriptions in 2021, the cost for a 1-month supply was $831 on average. There was limited variation in the total cost of a 1-month supply, with half of prescriptions costing between $807 and $838 in 2021. Enrollees paid $66 out of pocket, on average, in 2021 for a 1-month supply of semaglutide. A quarter of prescriptions cost less than $15 out of pocket, on average, and another quarter cost more than $80 out of pocket, on average. So the cost of obesity falls directly on employers, and there are no incentives for employees to reduce costs. This is a benefit. Retailers, the makers of foods marketed for weight loss, and other types of companies could see knock-on effects from the rise of diabetes and weight loss drugs like Ozempic. Diet companies are bracing for disruption. For decades, weight loss companies have relied on branded, pre-packaged meals and lifestyle programs. Some, like Weight Watchers and Noom, have raced to sell GLP-1 drugs themselves, while others still hope their products can survive the Ozempic era. Jenny Craig shut its weight loss centers in May after 40 years, and Simply Good Foods, which distributes Atkins diet products like frozen meals and cookies, will market Atkins as a perfect complement to people thinking about using the drugs. The company's chief executive at the time, Joe Scalzo, has stated. Medtronic's chief executive, Jeff Martha, said the company had seen a modest dip in bariatric surgery, presumably as people opted for weight loss drugs instead. And some analysts believe the drugs could disrupt the American diet completely. The need for change. There exists a mentality of not being responsible for ourselves. I am not responsible for the food you feed me. I will sue you if it makes me fat. I am not responsible for the drugs I take. If they harm me, I will sue you. Already, the first semaglutide and tirzepatide lawsuits are being filed. It is part of the accepted culture. We have seen this play out in the opioids market. The Purdue pharma scandal surrounding OxyContin must go down in history as a corporate crime. Yet, this is being played out in other markets every day. So what we can expect are significant fluctuations in the argument. However, the major objective of the dialogue remains the same. It is to cause doubt that leads to inaction, acceptance of the status quo, and a feeling of powerlessness. Cultivating the main attitude that we have the right to have foods that poison us and make us fat for it is a visible sign of our wealth. The media culture of not fat shaming, whilst adorable, it is a narrative that is driven by, paid for, and set by major corporations that wish to sell products. Behavior that is promoted under the guise of inclusiveness by influencers who get paid by corporations to pander to the lowest common denominator. We seem to have confused genuine activism with wealth generation. The collective narrative is not of self-responsibility, but of that of being a victim. It is always somebody else's fault. This is but a product of poisoned mind thinking. A system fed on shit will produce high-speed shit. Anxiety, nervousness, and inability to focus. People do have the intrinsic right to self-determination, but not at the expense of the extermination of another species. The average American eats 174 animals per year, 23 chickens, 1/3 of a pig, 1/10 of a cow, 3/4 of a turkey, a small amount of duck, 12 fish, 137 shellfish, mostly shrimp. Going plant-based can have a meaningful impact on animals, your health, and the planet. In the final analysis, it is not about the larger picture which you can only indirectly influence. It is about you. If you are happy being complicit in crimes against life, then power on. If you are not happy with this, then do something about it. You can. If you do not know whether you are or not, do something positive anyway. You can. Going vegan might not make the world a perfect place, but it would help make it a kinder, greener, healthier one. Thank you for listening. Please like or subscribe to this podcast and refer a friend. In the next episode, we will discuss the question of whether animals have souls, and we will take this show on the road to finding out what it is like to be a traveling vegan. Until then.
This has been a production of Spirit Quest Publications, a division of Anthony and Mary Holistic Health Services, LLC. All rights reserved.